Hello, my friends. It's William with the Grand Duke Dmitri Diary series. I'm back in the Grand Salon at Schatz Alp, and I have had a couple of days off, you could say, from doing the videos. So if you are looking expectantly for one, I apologize for that. I'm definitely not immune to feeling discouraged when the views have gone way down. So I thank the handful of you who watch very faithfully for that. And in fact, we're reaching a crossroads because we're up to the 29th of April, and the last major diary entry, the last full diary entry for 1921 is the 30th of April. So after that, things are rather scanty, and we could still go forward with the rest of 1921, but the fact of the matter is I don't have those entries on my USB stick that I brought with me, and I don't have the printout or the microfilm. So unfortunately, that is not an option. So the question then is whether to go back to 1915, which is the first surviving full volume of Dmitri's adult diaries, adult not in content, but the first that we have that was written by him when he was an adult, as opposed to when he was an adolescent. Or to go forward, since I'm here at Schatz Alp, where he spent the last 2.5 years of his life, to go forward and do the diary entries from 1939 and 1940 that he wrote while he was here. So if any of you want to weigh in on that, I would be very happy to hear your wishes. My inclination at the moment is to jump ahead to 1939 to the Schatz Alp Diaries, but yeah, we'll see. I've kind of gone back and forth on that. Okay, so meanwhile, a recap from the last time we did the second part of the diary entry of the 28th of April, 1921. And in that second part of the diary entry, it talked about the first day of Maria's bazaar in Paris, her charity bazaar, although not really so much raising funds for a charity, but allowing Russian ladies in exile, emigres, or refugees, as Dmitri calls them, to actually earn money by selling their own wares at the bazaar. And Dmitri was very impressed by those wares. But he was, of course, really proud of what Maria produced and thought that her work was the best. And I'm sure it was very, very good because she was able to do it on a professional basis later. And pleased with the fact that her things sold the best. There weren't a lot of people there that day, but there was a brisk trade in Maria's things, in particular, whether people wanted items made by a Grand Duchess, which might well have been the case, or whether hers were just the nicest things. Either way, according to Dmitri, they were the big sellers, and he says about that, thank God, because apparently he feared that she would be crushed if her things didn't sell well. And she probably needed the money too, let's face it. Okay, so our cast for today, we have people who are already familiar, Sybil Chrissoveloni and Alec Putiatin. Coco does not make an appearance. She has only been in the Holy Week diary entries when Dmitri goes and has tea with her, basically. She's not, at least at this point, really integrated into the activities of the Russian community. So she's not going to the Russian parties. She's not going to this bazaar, or if she does go, Dmitri completely doesn't mention it, and I think he would mention it if she made an appearance. So, Sybil Chrissoveloni, you remember, she and her husband Jean, or Yanis, were the great patrons of Maria and Gulia. They were Romanian, they were extremely wealthy, and Sybil Chrissoveloni had offered her house as the location for the bazaar. And Alec Putyatin was living with Maria and Gulia. He was Gulia's younger brother and a very good guitarist. And then we have Russian ladies again, as in the previous video. The Russian ladies are together a character, you could say, in this episode. And isn't it a pity that nobody is doing a series, a television series based on the diaries? That would be truly grand. Okay, so here we go. 29th of April, 1921, a Friday in Paris, and Dmitri was living at 76 Rue Miromesnil. In the morning, I went for a drive in the Bois with Maria. I lunched at their place, and then we went together to the bazaar at the Chrissovelonis. This time there were a lot more people than before, and everyone was in high spirits. Sybil herself was amazingly hospitable and sweet. She served the ladies tea and generally took a direct part in everything. It was very pleasant to hear all the approving comments about Maria from the various ladies who were participating in the bazaar. Yes, and they were right to be thankful. She carried the whole thing on her shoulders. Around 6 o'clock, we stopped by the church for a minute to venerate the shroud. Thankfully, there were fewer people than before and almost no crush at all. I dined at Maria's. Gulia and Alec were there. I didn't stay long, but returned home early and went straight to bed. All right, so, Sybil Chrissoveloni does indeed seem to have been a very generous person, and even though I don't get that she and Dmitri were ever an item, she was the one who rented his flat for him and who also furnished it. So, but she treated Maria the same way. So I don't, draw any inferences from that. Okay, so the bazaar, understandably, on the Friday is better attended than it was on Thursday, and we have Sybil directly involved. And what particularly pleases Dmitri is that the ladies are raving about Maria and the job she's done on this bazaar. And he had considered her rather isolated and rather snubbed earlier on in the winter of that year. So he was obviously very gratified by this. And I'm sure he was right when he said that she carried the whole thing on her shoulders, and that the ladies appreciated that. My unfortunately recently deceased godmother, Sonia Goodman, her mother, who knew Dmitri and Maria well, was impressed by the work that Maria did when they were still living in London, by what she did and what she always tried to do for the emigre community. She was not impressed by Dmitri's efforts, which she saw as negligible, but she was very impressed by Maria's willingness to roll up her sleeves and dive in and do what she could. And in general, that seems to have been the case, that the women were more willing to do that than the men within the Russian immigration. Okay, so then they go to church. And it's odd that he says they stopped by church around 6 o'clock, because this was Good Friday, and on Good Friday you usually have an early service, then you have an afternoon service that starts around 3 o'clock and usually wouldn't go to 6 o'clock, and then you have an evening service. So maybe they went to the church stop by, as he says, while there was no service going on between the afternoon service and the evening service, because what happens at the afternoon service is that the epitafios comes to the forefront. So the epitafios is a cloth that depicts Christ in the tomb, and on that day, during that Good Friday service, you walk into the church underneath the epitafios, and it's a particular blessing. So for the more superstitious, it's considered good luck. And grandmothers will also sort of prod their little grandchildren into crawling 3 times under this structure that holds the epitafios, the cloth. There's also an epitafios wooden structure that the cloth epitafios is laid in, and it's completely decorated with flowers. And yayas, the grandmothers, consider it, again, good luck for the children to crawl underneath the wooden structure. It's a blessing, but superstitions do tend to creep into things. So it's also, unfortunately, something that the yayas want the grandchildren to do for good luck. Well, who am I to criticize? Anyway, what Dmitri and Maria meant then, what they were going to church to do was to venerate the shroud. So you would go up and you would either do prostrations or just cross yourself and kiss the shroud. And so they went to do that. And, there were fewer people than before and almost no crush at all. He says so after their very bad experience that left Maria in tears at the Thursday communion service. They had this nice calm experience then. And, if I'm right that it was between services, then it would make sense that, people were coming in and out, and yeah, there wouldn't have been a crush. Okay, so yeah, they just pop in and then leave and have dinner at Maria and Gulia's, and then Dmitri goes home and tells us that he goes straight to bed. So there we go. Nice that they had a good experience this time to sort of counteract the experience they'd had on the Thursday. So next time in the final 1921 video, for the time being, of 30th April, it is the big day. It is Pascha. It's Easter. And Dmitri is going to participate fully this year, as he has not in the past couple of years. And he ends that diary entry with a cross. And yeah, we have a big cast of characters, since Easter, far more than Christmas, Pascha, I should say, far more than Christmas, is the big day when families come together, and the biggest celebration, much more so than Christmas in the Orthodox world. So it's interesting to experience that through Dmitri, and I hope you'll come back from that. Meanwhile, I should just say in passing that while I was feeling a little discouraged about how things were going with dear old Dmitri, I decided, sort of on the spur of the moment, to do a video on the novel Dr. Zhivago, which I've just finished reading for the 3rd time. And the main character, Zhivago, in many ways reminds me of Dmitri. And so I would encourage you to read that, because I've always thought that Dmitri really is almost a literary type from a Russian novel, and even more so than a Dostoevsky character. I would say he's very, very similar to Yuri Zhivago. Anyway, so if you're at all interested in that, watch the video, and I will see you next time. Bye.